Now, to help me in my quest to bring you common sense and to bring you truth, and I don't know, a bit of sardonicism, a bit of optimism amidst it all, is the one and only Tim Montgomerie, former number 10 advisor, founder of Conservative Home, and a relatively newly adopted reformist. Good morning, Tim. How are you?
Well, I'm full of cold, actually, Alex. So I wish I'd had a holiday in the sun last week. But nice to see you, and I hope you had a good break.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm looking at you down there rather than over there, because I've got a new rule, which is nobody is allowed to come to me with any sort of snivel. I'm off to America to go and hang out at inauguration next week, and I want to be well. I don't want any of this flu business, this RSV, the new China virus that's going around. No, thank you. You keep it to yourself. Sharing is not caring. Talking about China, well, Rachel Reeves seems to think that's the best place to be right now, rather than deal with the market turmoil here in the UK. In fact, she seems to think that China could well be the solution to help us grow the economy. What do you think to that?
Well, she certainly needs some solutions, doesn't she? You know, she's supposed to be the Chancellor that delivered growth. That was the main economic mission. Not the main economic mission. It was supposed to be the main mission of this Labour government. But it's going all very badly wrong, isn't it? And so I think it's a combination of things. But of course, the big thing was the massive increase in taxes that she introduced in her own budget. And I've been talking to Labour people in the last sort of day or two, Alex, and they do not now think that Rachel Reeves will survive the end of this year. I think she may have to go much more quickly. But she's been a disastrous Chancellor, I'm afraid.
It seems to me that going over to China to say, help us with growth, is just completely non-commonsensical, for want for a better phrase, given that, by and large, they managed to undercut everything we do in terms of manufacturing because they themselves don't adhere to net zero targets. And we go over there, writing them a massive check paid for by taxpayers so we can self-flagellate and straitjacket ourselves at the altar of net zero, while they can use coal-fired power stations to make solar panels. And they must be laughing out the side of their mouth because she's just going back for more. She's like, Oliver, please, can you actually take all of our economic growth? Can you take our manufacturing away from us because you do it cheaper? And we don't have a whit about how on earth we could manage to get manufacturing going in this country. It seems to be counterproductive.
Completely. And I think one of the reasons why Donald Trump and most of American industry now takes the view that they do on China is, you know, often they did joint ventures in China, they invested in local economies, and all of their intellectual capital, their ingenuity was stolen by Chinese again and again and again. And we've had the whole issue of Hong Kong. A former Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, signed an agreement with China that's been completely ripped up. I could give you plenty of other examples as well, Alex, but you're probably familiar with them. The fact is, we can't trust China. If we do economic deals with them, they'll organise them so that not just to their advantage, but that we're ripped off. Right. So I really don't understand the logic at all.
No, this has been China's modus operandi for ages. I remember I started writing a book on it about 20 years ago, believe it or not, when I was living out in Ghana, because I saw the Chinese were even doing that to Ghanaian stuff, like African fabrics, that once upon a time they had about 11... Yeah. They don't. The thing is about the Chinese economy is, by and large, it isn't able to come up with the ideas. But by gum, when they nick them, they're brilliant at production lines because they treat their own people like rubbish. And so going there and saying, oh, well, you can do it far cheaper. We've got all the genius over here, but you can actually make it. This is the root of impoverishing the country. This is what's gone wrong in the first place. I don't get it.
No, I completely. Sorry.
Let's talk about the unions. Badenoch turning around going, Britain is back under the control of the union. She's got a point, doesn't she?
Oh, completely. And one of the first acts, of course, of the Labour government was to give in to the union, the pay demands of train drivers. And now train drivers in Britain are already paid better than anyone else in Europe, I think potentially the world. And yet Labour gave them more money at the same time as they took away the winter fuel allowance from so many pensioners. And of course, what we've seen in the recent days is Labour voting to undo a lot of the education reforms that didn't just come from the Tories, but came from Tony Blair as well. And why are they doing that? As Kemi Badenoch said, is because the unions have such a stranglehold on Labour. And that stranglehold, linked to what we've just been talking about, is probably only going to get tighter. because Labour did have a reasonable amount of money from business, donations from business before the election. But because of their economic mismanagement, I think business is turning away from Labour. So Labour will become more dependent on the unions, which won't be good for the country at all.
Yeah, the problem is, if we need the sort of mileification of the economy, if we need to sort of take our own chainsaw to the civil service, to public services, because she's got to choose either between economic growth, which she's unable to stimulate, and going over to China, I don't think is the solution to that. Higher taxation, which we just cannot afford, that's going to throw us into a period of increased stagnation, or some sort of austerity, some sort of cut. And when it comes to trying to do anything, when it comes to making some efficiency savings, that's when the unions close in. That's when they sort of grab the government by the hand and say, you better do as we say, or we're not going to staff the hospitals. We're going to bring the whole country to a grinding halt.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have some very, very difficult public sector pay settlements coming over future years of this Labour government. And so I think we'll have a lot of industrial turmoil to add to all the other problems that we have.
I was thinking when I was getting the tube over here this morning, I did this before on a show where I sort of came up with a fantasy, let's make the melee list. What would we cut and how much money would we save? Because no one ever seems to want to do this. And I started making an itinerary of things that, quite frankly, we can live without and should bin straight away, including, I would say, controversially, just get rid of all the devolution. And yet Labour want to create more devolution, more sort of metro mayors, more sort of glorified county councils, more layers of public administration that cost the taxpayer loads of money, when we could be turning Holyrood into residential flats or something and having just one government in Westminster. That would save a bob or two.
It wouldn't. How much would it save? Do you know?
Do you know, I did this calculation the last time I sort of brought this topic up on the show, but I'm going to have to Google in the advert break to find out. But a lot, basically. If you add up the 3 devolved governments and all the sort of metro mayors, police and crime commissioners, what's the point of them? They don't do anything. If we were
They are particularly. Yeah.
I think we've got more politicians per capita than almost anywhere on earth. It's a madness. They cost money. Yeah. They come with their offices. They come with the big pensions. It's absolutely insane.
All new politicians, of course, they have their own ideas. So there's no continuity in policy. No one implements anything. New politicians take office and they want to do something different from other politicians. So I'm afraid the big expense from them is constant churning in public policy.
Well, ironically, it doesn't seem Rachel Reeves has many ideas. Apparently she's going to all of her other staff and this, that and the other going, oh, you know, well, please tell me what to do for economic growth. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, yeah, I was an economist at the Bank of England. Don't forget that. But I'm not going to come up with any sort of coherent economic strategy. No, everyone else needs to tell me what to do. I want to bring your focus now to Elon Musk and the reports that he's trying to oust Starmer. I mean, this isn't exactly a secret. He sort of said on X, hasn't he? Is there any way to get rid of him?
I picked up he doesn't quite like it. That's certainly true.
I don't think he's a fan somehow. No. But I think, you know, I think for Elon, this is in the context of looking at Britain, which for a lot of the Western world, we're the sort of great-grandma, aren't we? We're sort of the from empire and all the rest of it. When we go wrong, there's a real palpable sense of it all going very wrong. And people have looked at the state of the UK economy, been shocked by the grooming gang scandal, which kind of, it holds a very ugly mirror up to our own society when you think, gosh, you know, it's amazing that we haven't had, you know, mass protests. Of course, we're not allowed to. We end up in clink if we even sort of, you know, mutter concern about these topics.
All right, bandwagon you're on, Alex. No, that's what Keir Starmer says. You should know better.
Well, it's Keir Starmer's now basically calling Elon Musk far right. He doesn't stop, does he?
I know.
It's insane.
I think Keir Starmer probably thinks that most people are far right, actually.
But what do you think Elon's sort of... why has he got this intrigue about the United Kingdom in particular? What do you reckon is sort of going through his mind as he sort of focused very heavily on making sure the government in the United Kingdom, you know, pulls its socks up and starts working for the people? Why Britain?
Well, look, you know, we often knock our country, and I think our country is in trouble in various ways. But we still sort of are like a soft power superpower. Because of our universities, because of our education system, because of the English language, because of our history and tourism, etc. You know, we have an outsized influence on, I think, how the world thinks. So many people travel through London all the time. It's one of the great international cities. And some of that influence, I think, is for good, but a lot of it, I think, is increasingly for bad, because the political correctness that's seeping through much of our domestic life is sort of, I think, entering that ideas class as well. So Elon Musk, his interest in Britain, I think, partly comes because of family history. But as someone who's interested in ideas, I can understand why he would be worried about the influence that Britain has in its various channels.
Yeah, someone's just messaged me, Dean from Dagenham, saying, "Morning, Alex. It seems to me the biggest threats to the people of the UK are the far left, of which we have many." I mean, this is so true. The amount that the sort of shift in the political spectrum has moved, that actually far leftism is considered centrism, and anything that isn't basically communist is now considered fascistic, and, you know, it's mad.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a global shift towards the right. We're seeing it in Europe, we've seen it in America, of course. You keep mentioning Argentina, and we're the exception at the moment, certainly by whether you look at Keir Starmer having the massive majority that he does. But I wonder actually if we are that exception, if you look at underlying opinion polls. This government, I think, has shown to become more unpopular more quickly than any previous new government. So when we are sort of force-fed leftism, the British people don't like it.
I mean, let's see if we can answer Elon's question, which is there a way to change the government? Because unfortunately, I think when I look at the apparatus of state, there just isn't. They've got a big majority. They would need to essentially either have a vote of no confidence in their own leader. That could happen, perhaps, in the future. But it's not going to actually change the nature and shape of the government we have in power, is it?
No, I think the media plays an important role in holding the government to account. Opinion polls will keep the government hopefully on its toes. But I'm afraid, hold on to your seat, Alex, I think we have got 4 more years of Labour government. And we know how much damage they've done in 6 months. How much they'll do in 4.5 years frightens me. What do? Our task is to be ready for the time in 4 years' time when I think the British people will know the economy and the country is in fundamental trouble, and they'll be ready for medicine in a way that they were at the end of the 1970s, but haven't been ready for medicine of late. It's hard to do difficult things, but I don't think we're far away now from a moment when the public will demand a big change in direction, because they'll know without any question that Britain is in trouble. And will there be a political party ready at that next election to say, a little bit like a doctor treating a serious injury, it's going to be tricky, there's going to be pain, but it will be better if you take this medicine. That's what we now need to prepare, because most of the political parties at the last election just sold soft soap, really, and no real solutions to not just Britain's problems, but the decline, I think, of the West.
Yeah, I think there was a pivotal moment. We sort of hit a fulcrum, I think, at the day that Donald Trump was saved from assassination. An act of God, some might say, that now we actually have, or will have, a president in the United States with far more sensible and assertive ideas than anyone that's really gone before. Even Donald Trump 1.0, one could argue. And hopefully this will give political cover, and the apprentice might be able to teach the master once more what it means to live in a true democracy. Thank you ever so much, Tim Montgomerie.